The other story we've been following on Boeing is releasing hundreds of internal messages that detail employees mocking the FAA and others. Phil LeBeau joins us right now. He's got more on this story, and the emails are pretty incendiary, Phil.
They are, and this is just a few of them. 100 pages of light reading, Becky. We're not going to go through all 100 pages, but this issue with these messages, these text messages, emails, etc., communication between whether it's technical pilots and engineers at Boeing commercial airplanes, it gets to this point, and Joe needs to listen to this. The concern amongst regulators, the concern on Capitol Hill, is that Boeing had a culture where when it comes to the MAX, they did not want to have any simulator training because that would make it more attractive to sell the plane to airlines. And these messages reinforce just that whole culture of, look, what do we have to do in order to tell the regulators, to convince the regulators that simulators are not needed for the MAX? Here's an example. One employee to another says, would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't. The other employee answers, no. In another message, one employee says, I still haven't been forgiven by God for covering up I did last year. Basically insinuating I was covering up against a regulator who was checking some of the work that I was doing. And then there are some of these messages. Look, you're going to get this when you have thousands of employees sending tens of thousands of messages. This airplane is designed by clowns who are in turn supervised by monkeys. Now, the FAA says these documents do not show any new safety issues with the simulators or the MAX. So in that regard, there's no smoking gun in these documents, and that's true. However, this gets to the issue of how Boeing and the culture at Boeing commercial airplanes operated between 2011, really 2013 is where these messages start, all the way up 2018. Boeing says all of the MAX simulators do function effectively right now, and that whatever is written in here is not a reflection on how those simulators operate now. The company also issued a statement saying the language used in these communications and some of the sentiments they express are inconsistent with Boeing values, and the company is taking appropriate action in response. This will ultimately include disciplinary and other personnel action once the necessary reviews are completed. As you take a look at shares of Boeing, we should point out these documents were first turned over to both the FAA as well as staffers on Capitol Hill back in December, which then brings up the question, why are they coming out now? I think there are two reasons. One, they were likely to be leaked anytime soon. And two, Dave Calhoun starts as CEO on Monday. Guys, one of his mandates is the days of arrogance at Boeing are gone. They have made it clear to the FAA. They have made it clear to the folks on Capitol Hill. Boeing is hell-bent on changing the culture where they call the shots and the regulators who are working on an upcoming aircraft will just go along for the ride. They're not saying that happened entirely with the MAX, but they're trying to make it very clear that they are turning over a new leaf as much as possible.
Phil, I guess, goes to the heart of the idea that the company is now suggesting that there should be flight simulator training for any of the pilots on the 737 MAX.
Yes. And that gets into a number of things, and it gets very technical. But one of those things is that you want to make sure that at a minimum, when pilots around the world are flying the MAX, they have the right sequence down for whatever event may happen, not just with MCAS, but for anything else in the cockpit. And there's going to be a slight change in the muscle memory for certain sequences. And they want to make sure that everybody has it down cold. That's why they are asking the regulator, in this case the FAA, to say, look, as part of any ungrounding of the MAX, we think there should be simulator training.
So who pays for that? Because in the emails that
Boeing ultimately.
They talk about this like it would be $1 million. It saves them $1 million per plane if they don't have to train the pilots on those things. So Boeing is now going to be taking this, because it seems like some of the concern comes from the idea that things that should have been safety features and required were treated as extras and add-ons that cost a little more along the plane. Things like the monitor to be able to see the MCAS was not working, the lights and things in the dashboards along those lines. Correct.
But in terms of your question of who pays for this, ultimately Boeing pays for this. But this does get to the question of when they were selling this aircraft, Becky, one of the selling points was you've got a fleet of 737s, buy the MAX. Because if you buy the MAX, your pilots who are already certified on the 737, they're not going to have to go through all the simulator training. That's a big selling point when you're talking to an airline that's deciding between buying the 737 MAX with pilots who are already certified on the 737 or switching over to the Airbus A320, which would require a whole bunch of training, costly training. That's the selling point that they were hitting on the MAX. These emails get to the point of the concern that they really wanted to push that, so they were going to make sure as much as possible, if any way possible, they were going to make sure that airlines would not have to go through simulator training.
That was part of the whole corporate strategy, that it was not that different than the 737. It
Correct.
was just called the 737 MAX. Let's roll it out there. Let's do it. And these, you get a company that has been successful and so safe and had, you do get complacency, obviously, sets in. They want to roll this thing out, and obviously, and profit incentives cut both ways. They hold people accountable sometimes because you can't waste money,
right.
But they also cause corner cutting, or in hindsight, now that we all know that there were 2 crashes, but prior to that, I don't know if any of these employees, if they knew in hindsight that there was going to be fatal crashes, I'm not sure you would have seen those flip emails. So,
I'm sure if people knew in hindsight, if you knew in hindsight that your work could lead to a crash, you would not be engaging
I really think they wanted
attitude.
And they're still saying, look, it wasn't that much of a change. It was a slight move here, and we've addressed that with some software, et cetera.
Right.
But turns out, it was more of a change than people. And they could have heard that from the pilot, and I think they did hear that. We saw some of the smoking guns from pilots, too, that said, wait a second, this thing, I had trouble controlling it on takeoff.
One thing that I can't stress enough, and I have heard this from current and former Boeing employees, this comment of, were we a little arrogant in dealing with the FAA?
Right.
Probably.
Right.
I mean, that arrogance is coming home to bite them right now.
Right, and it's not surprising that it is. And that probably has been seen again and again through history that happens. And then, you get too arrogant, and then you get brought back to earth, which is not a good way of phrasing it either.